I've lived in Valdez my whole life, which means I've spent my whole life explaining to people outside Alaska that no, it's not the town from the oil spill they're thinking of, and yes, we really do get 30 feet of snow some winters, and no, I have never once used that as an excuse to skip something that mattered to my family. That last part matters because my mother, Camille, has built an entire personality around excuses, and for 22 years I watched her use every single one of them on my daughter. Andrea is my only kid. She's 22 now, in her last semester of the nursing program at University of Alaska Anchorage, which if you don't know the geography sits about 300 miles and one genuinely unfriendly mountain pass away from our house. Thompson Pass in November isn't a scenic drive. It's a decision you make with your whole chest, checking the avalanche report and your gas gauge before you even back out of the driveway. I know this because I drove it more times than I can count when Andrea was younger, because somebody in this family needed to show up, and it sure wasn't going to be my mother, Camille. She's not a bad grandmother in the way you'd write a villain. She sends birthday cards. She remembers Andrea's favorite candy. But my cousin Matthew, my mother's sister's boy, raised 2 streets over from us his whole life, has always been the one she rearranges her whole calendar for. When we were kids, it was Matthew's Little League games over my piano recitals. When Andrea got older, it was Matthew's truck troubles over Andrea's college move-in day. I used to think it was because Matthew's mom passed young and Camille felt like she owed him something extra. Maybe that's part of it. But owing somebody something doesn't mean you get to shortchange everybody else forever, and eventually the math on that stops making sense to the people getting shortchanged. Freshman year, Camille told Andrea she'd drive down for move-in weekend. Andrea texted her the dorm address, the parking instructions, even a photo of the little side-by-side fridge she'd need help carrying up 3 flights, because the elevator was broken that week. 2 days before, Camille called to say Matthew had a hockey tournament in Fairbanks and she couldn't do both. Andrea moved in with me and Gabriel and a fridge that took 4 trips up the stairwell. Sophomore year, there was family weekend, which the nursing program makes a big deal out of because it's when they do the white coat ceremony for the students moving into clinicals. Camille said she'd come for that too. She didn't. Matthew was studying for his GED retake, and she said he needed her energy that weekend, which is a phrase I've never been able to make sense of no matter how many times I've turned it over. Junior year was the pinning ceremony. A smaller thing, but one Andrea had actually cried about when she called to tell me she made it into the second half of the program. Camille missed that one for Matthew's 25th birthday party, which involved a rented pontoon boat and, from what I heard, a taco truck. So when I say Camille never visited my daughter in college, I don't mean she forgot once. I mean 4 years, 4 chances, and a batting average of 0. Andrea stopped mentioning the dates to her after a while. I think that's the part that actually got to me. Not the missed events themselves, but watching my daughter learn, slowly and quietly, to stop expecting anything, so she wouldn't have to feel the specific sting of being right about it. This past November, Andrea had her pharmacology final on a Monday morning. It's not a normal final. It's proctored, timed, and offered exactly once a semester. If you miss it without a documented medical excuse, you don't get to make it up. You get pushed back an entire semester on your clinical placement, which for a nursing student is close to catastrophic. She'd told Camille about it back in September, the same way she told her about everything, mostly out of habit at that point, rather than any real hope Camille would do anything with the information. On the Wednesday before, Camille texted her that Matthew's apartment move had gotten bumped up. His new lease started that Saturday, and the old place needed to be cleared by Monday morning, the same Monday morning as Andrea's exam. Camille wanted her to drive up from Anchorage Sunday night, help load the truck Monday at dawn, and figure the test out some other way. Andrea called me that night. Not upset yet, just tired in the way she gets when she's already run the math and knows what's coming. She wants me to skip farm final for Matthew's couch, she said. I told her to explain the stakes to her grandmother plainly, in writing, so there'd be no confusion later about what she'd been asked to give up. She did. She sent Camille a full paragraph, the retake policy, the clinical placement consequences, the exact hours of the exam window, even an offer to help Matthew pack boxes remotely by finding him a moving company 2 towns over that did last-minute jobs. Camille's reply came back 4 words long. Family comes first, Andrea. Andrea held her ground. She said she loved Matthew and hoped the move went smooth, but she wasn't missing the one exam in her entire program that had no do-over. Camille didn't respond again until Sunday evening, when Andrea confirmed for the 3rd time that she'd be staying in Anchorage to study instead of driving down. That's when the text landed that Andrea would later screenshot and send to me at 9:47 that night, my phone lighting up the dark kitchen while Gabriel and I were doing dishes. So this is how you repay your family? I read it twice. I know my mother's voice well enough to hear exactly how she said it in her head, flat, wounded, absolutely certain she was the one being wronged. Andrea sent one reply, just one. No follow-up, no second message to soften it or explain herself further. I've read it probably 30 times since, and I still think it's the most honest thing anyone in our family has said out loud in a decade. You're right. This is exactly how I repay you, by still trying to become somebody. Even after you skipped my move-in for Matthew's hockey tournament, missed family weekend for his GED test, and missed my pinning for his birthday party. I'm not driving 6 hours through Thompson Pass to lose a semester so Matthew doesn't have to hire movers. I'm taking my final. Tell him I hope the couch fits through the door. She turned her phone off after that and went to bed, because she had an exam in the morning and she'd apparently decided she'd said everything she needed to say. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after Gabriel went to bed, staring at that screenshot, feeling something I can only describe as a strange mix of heartbreak and pride, like watching your kid win a fight you wish they'd never had to have. 10 minutes after Andrea sent that text, she told me later she'd checked the timestamp. There was a knock at our door. Hard, fast knuckles, the kind that tells you before you even open it that something's happened. It was my father, John, standing on the porch in his coat, half-buttoned, no hat, snow already sitting in his hair, and no Camille beside him. He doesn't come over without her. In 30-some years I could probably count on one hand the times my dad has shown up at my house alone, unannounced, at 10 at night. I let him in and he stood in our entryway dripping onto the mat, not saying anything for a second, just working his jaw the way he does when he's deciding how to start. Your mother's a wreck, he said finally. Andrea sent her something. I saw it, I said. Andrea sent it to me first. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. Then he sat down at our kitchen table without being asked, which he never does, and he told me he'd been sitting in the living room when Camille read that text out loud to him, expecting him to be as outraged as she was. And instead, he said, he just sat there and realized every single thing in it was true. He remembered the hockey tournament. He remembered driving Camille to Fairbanks himself, while Andrea moved boxes with me. He remembered telling Camille at the time that it didn't sit right with him, and he remembered letting it go because it was easier than the argument. I've been letting it go for 4 years, he said. I told myself I was staying out of it. Truth is, I was just choosing the quiet option every single time, same as always, and your mother took my quiet as agreeing with her. I didn't say anything. I let him keep going because it felt like he needed to get through it without me softening any of it for him. He told me he wasn't there to ask me to smooth things over with Camille, and he wasn't there to defend the text she'd sent. He said he'd left the house right after Camille went to bed still fuming, because if he waited until morning he was afraid he'd talk himself back into the quiet option again. What he wanted, he said, sitting there with his coat still dripping, was to know if I thought it was too late to drive to Anchorage himself, Monday after Andrea's exam finished, so he could be standing in that parking lot when she walked out. I told him Thompson Pass wasn't going to care how he felt about his timing, and he said he knew that, and he was going anyway. He left the next morning, before sunrise in his own truck, chains on, thermos of coffee Gabriel made him sitting in the cup holder. He texted us from a pullout near Worthington Glacier just to say the road was clear, which I understood was less about the road and more about him needing us to know he hadn't turned around. He got to Anchorage that afternoon and was standing outside the nursing building when Andrea came out of her exam, hands jammed in his coat pockets, looking like a man who genuinely had no idea what he was going to say once she saw him. Andrea told me later he didn't apologize with a big speech. He just said I should have been at the other ones too, and hugged her before she had the chance to answer. She passed the final. Camille didn't call for almost 3 weeks, and when she finally did, it wasn't really an apology so much as an attempt to move forward like nothing had happened, which is its own kind of answer if you're paying attention. Matthew got his apartment moved with the help of 2 guys from his new job and a rented dolly, and as far as I know the couch made it through the door just fine. Love that only shows up for the people it finds convenient isn't really love being tested, it's just favoritism wearing a nicer outfit. Andrea didn't win that exchange by being cruel. She won it by refusing to accept a debt she never actually owed, and by telling the truth plainly instead of staying quiet to keep the peace. And my father's 10-minute drive mattered more than any speech could have, because showing up, actually, physically showing up, especially after you've failed to, says more than an apology ever will. If there's a family in your life keeping score in a way that never adds up in your favor, you're allowed to stop playing along. Boundaries aren't a betrayal of family. Sometimes they're the only thing that finally makes the people who love you pay attention.